Yes, welcome back to the program. And just a moment ago, we were chatting about the results of COVID-19 affecting children and abandonment of children in South Africa on the increase. But we also see that in these particular times, as Dr. Don Pinnock writes, that animal rights and the welfare of wildlife in particular is something that's been overlooked, falling through the cracks of the authorities, that being the Department of Environmental Affairs and the Department of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries. And Dr. Don Pinnock is an associate of the Southern Right, a group of top travel and natural history writers and photographers in South Africa. We welcome him to the program. Good morning, Dr. Pinnock.
Good morning, Azza.
Wonderful speaking to you. So, animal welfare rights and the rights, particularly in terms of wildlife, where are we right now as South Africa?
I'm really worried about where South Africa is going at the moment in terms of animal rights. There are discussions about animal rights, but animals, wild animals particularly, seem to be losing more rights than they're gaining. What's happened and what got me writing this article and doing the investigation is that there are a number of acts and bits of legislation that are being passed that are very disturbing. Wild animals were some time back, late last year, 23 wild animals, including lions and big game, were included in the Animal Improvement Act. Now, that is a piece of farming legislation that allows them to be manipulated as farming animals. And then, even more of a shock, this year, 93 wild animals were registered or logged to be registered under the Meat Safety Act, which is even worse. That means that they can be turned into whatever we do to cattle, artificial insemination. We can carve them up, we can use them for meat. These include elephants, hippos, and all sorts of things. So, what is going on here? We have an Animal Protection Act, but that is administered by the Department of Agriculture, and that was designed for farm animals and domestic animals. So this is what really worries me, and that is that South Africa should be a custodian of wildlife as a wildlife destination. It's got a big tourism industry. It really should be developing everything, particularly after COVID-19 starts easing. We really need tourism. 1 in 7 people in this country, food is put on the table by tourism. And yet seem to be these departments, the Department of Agriculture and the Department of the Environment, seem to be led around by the hunting industry, by the wildlife farming industry, which is a small group of people, which I think are putting the profile of this country on the line. We shouldn't be doing that.
So, what should we be doing? How do we then balance between the need to draw in international, tourists to our country, preserving the wildlife that we have in big natural parks, for example, and at the same time allowing for the hunting enthusiast who wants to come in to be able to spend his dollars, euros, or whatever other currency in our country? Where is the balance? Do you think that balance is being tilted now on the side of commercialization?
In answer to your last question, yes, I think it is. I'm not sure that hunting is the best way to go. I need to ask a question about why foreign people with large amounts of money and guns should come into South Africa or Africa generally, shoot our wild animals and mount their heads over their fireplaces. I actually, this could be controversial. I know that I have no problem with biltong hunters, people who, hunt for venison. It's a food issue. But trophy hunting is another thing completely. I think it's totally, in this day and age, trophy hunting is ridiculous. As to what we should do, the government seems to be bouncing around between bits of legislation. There's a whole debate about animal welfare and whether it's well-being or animal welfare. They're using lots of words, but they're not getting down to the real issue. We should be an example to the world. What we really ought to be doing now is putting together an animal welfare act. We should be using international best practice to put legislation in place as a guideline so that anybody, whether it's provincial or national or any private reserve, needs to know how we treat animals, how we treat particularly wild animals. The Animal Protection Act does cover wild animals, but it doesn't cover it appropriately. It's an agricultural act. So we need to put together decent legislation that protects wild animals.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So
in the wildlife and departments, they haven't grown up or had their training there. So certainly they are taking advice from people. Do you think that these advisory committees or within the departments themselves, they are reaching or getting the correct types of advisors to them?
Oh, that's a big one. Barbara Creasy, the Minister of Environment, has appointed a high-level panel to look into issues around elephants, lions, I think cheetahs, and rhinos. Now, if you look at the composition of that high-level panel, they're largely game farmers and hunters, hunting organizations. I think there's only one welfare-linked person on that. And so the conclusions that panel is going to come to are going to tip yet again in favor of the wildlife sustainable use. Now, sustainable use is it sounds good, but it's actually not good. It's why should we use wild animals? They have their own rights. They should be free to be who they are. And so I don't think that high-level panel, which is the top advisors to the Minister of Environment, should be so biased in favor of the use of wild animals. There are some traditional leaders on that panel. There are a few organizations that give some hope, one or two, but by and large, that panel is going to be biased in the favor of using wildlife to make money by a few people. Now, let's face it, who are these people? We need to ask who owns the game farms, who owns the hunting lodges. These are apartheid hangovers. They operate that way too. And I don't think that they should be the tail that's wagging the dog of our environmental policies.
Dr. Don Pinnock, wonderful chatting to you this morning. Thank you so much for that important information. And we continue speaking to you in the future going ahead. Thank you so much for your time. Go well, sir.
Goodbye.